Before the break, we were talking about the nearly 80% of elementary school teachers in Ontario that have directly experienced or witnessed school violence, according to a report from the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario earlier this year. Let's pick it up there, Karen. No question a big part of this is resources. But let me also ask, have we handcuffed our teachers such that they've almost lost authority to control the classroom? Because I'll tell you, when I was growing up, if you cussed at a teacher, if you threw a chair at a teacher, you'd be expelled. Yeah. But that isn't happening for some reason.
Yeah, it's very different now. And what we're finding is that when you step in to try and do the right thing and to try and support, oftentimes the teacher or the education worker is sent home because of it. But that's happening as well with administrators, with principals and vice principals. And we've worked with the Ontario Principal Council, and that's exactly what happens. When the principals try and step in and provide supports and do the right thing, there's a complaint, and now all of a sudden they're sent home and they're not able to be supporting the students in that school anymore.
I have had quite a few teachers I've provided care to, and what you mentioned rings true, is they often feel that maybe they don't have the authority and the ability to set the limits. They want to set these rules to prevent some of these inappropriate behaviors, not illnesses, but and they're maybe not feeling supported by the system, or they're fearful because of what the consequences, and hence it just continues until maybe they do go off on a health leave because something terrible happens.
But Joe, how about that? Children being exposed to some kid throwing a chair at a female teacher, that's violence against women. They're being exposed to it. They become increasingly desensitized to it as these things rise in our schools. Are you concerned that it could seep into our society?
Yeah, well, I think there's a number of factors. I think, again, teachers and educators and principals are not backed up as much as they need to enforce rules in school. Second, I think families suffer from poverty and other related issues who are not available to provide the necessary structure and guidelines and education at home about civility. And so when you combine these factors with lack of other resources, not necessarily health related, but it's helpful to have social workers, a psychologist, and other like guidance counselors who can meet with children and not have classrooms of 25 or 30 kids where one teacher is trying to manage it on their own. These are all a constellation of factors that I think are decaying, you know, sort of the behavior and the citizenship, as you put it, and then it just becomes a bigger issue. We need to deal with these things, and unfortunately we're seeing it more now because population grows, money is scarce within government. How we invest that money, it's got to be done wisely.
How is it that young people are brought into gangs? How does it happen?
That's an interesting question. There's a term that we use, call it clout chasing, just for the sake of being popular, or for the sake of wanting to feel protected. When we talk about schools, there's quite a bit of bullying that happens. So they want to feel safe, and they'll go to the people that are closest to them. So meaning, depending on neighborhoods. But then we've seen a shift as far as poverty being a driving force, where we're seeing more middle class kids wanting to get involved in the culture. That lends to something else that was brought up, and that is accessibility to this particular type of culture.
You said something that I think is really interesting, which is around this pressure to fit in, and especially so online, Paula, and how that is playing out as far as people acting out in the real world. I mean, social media has a huge role to play here.
I think it really does. I think we've all said that. You focused on that. And once one thing happens, it just gets passed along and along and along. And people do get really nervous about the randomness of what they're seeing. The shooting in Leslieville was very random. Probably wouldn't happen again tomorrow, but it has everybody very shaken. The killing of that young man in the subway, that shook everybody so deeply. But I do think that one of the themes here is this caring adults in place, whether it's in schools, and recently we've just now added 173 frontline staff in the transit system, particularly in the subways. So what makes a community safe? What makes you comfortable? How do you say something against misinformation online or in Instagram, tweets? You can hardly keep up with it. So I think really at the end of the day, it's people together talking, settling everything down, that makes the difference, whether they're in schools, whether they're in institutions, whether you have more officers. But we're battling an uphill battle around information. And I do think caring adults and good social interface is what really is missing. And we
It's
need
hard to
focus
predict
on.
who will be the caring adult for someone in a school. It could be the custodian, it could be the secretary.
Yes.
Someone who makes that connection with them, and that's what we need on a regular basis within that community of a school. It is the sense of belonging. Then you have that sense of ownership, and now you're going to work to protect each other and to support each other. But when you don't start at that base level, it all kind of falls apart. We had the Conference Board of Canada did a study for us a number of years ago, and this is not, they're not a left-leaning organization. And they came back and told us that every dollar you spend on education brings $1.30 back to society, because you save on the justice system, you save on the social care system, you save on people who are educated, need to use the healthcare system less. It makes sense to invest at that level. We can't be putting out the fires when they're in high school or when they're, young adults. We have to be doing it at an earlier time.
All right, coming up, the escalating car theft trend and how a thief swiped my car before my eyes. That story next.